What's up, everybody? This is Brian Davidson, and you are listening to the NIL Spotlight podcast brought to you by NIL Game Plan, your number one source for NIL news and, more importantly, education across all collegiate sports. Let's get after it. Krause founded NCSA College Recruiting in 2000 with a passion to help student athletes turn dreams of playing in college into a reality, and he built the largest recruiting network in the country. He built that based on his own experience as a student athlete going throughout the recruiting process and landing a full scholarship at Vanderbilt. Chris is also the author of Athletes Wanted and currently an advisor to both IMG and Endeavor. Chris, or CK is known to me, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brian. I sure appreciate it.
Well, a quick little disclosure before we dive in things today. Chris actually was my first boss back in 2006. He plucked me off the streets and I was literally answering the phone talking to families about the recruiting process. So I really appreciate your time and welcome to NIL Spotlight.
Thanks for having me on. And I love the fact that you're continuing your entrepreneurial journey and empowering leaders through sports. And that's a big theme of mine. So anything I can do to participate and amplify that message, I'm all in, Brian.
Well, one of the things you taught me very early at NCSA, because frankly it was painted on the wall, was the importance of putting families first and making sure the student athlete and the family were best positioned for the recruiting process. And I think NIL is a lot in the same way, but it can be a little more complicated. Talk about the family dynamic going through the recruiting process.
Well, it's number one, it's something that most people never go through. And if you're fortunate enough to have an opportunity to be recruited as a student athlete, you used to only go through it one time, but now with the transfer portal, you do have a chance to do do-overs nowadays, which has really changed the landscape of, I think, people's attitudes on how kids get recruited before you pick the school. Famous thing we talked about, it's a 4-year decision. It's not just a 4-year decision, but a 40-year decision. It's really going to, this college choice really is going to be a big part of who you are, who your friends are, what your career is going to be, your network. And so there's a lot riding on this decision. And most people don't know how to go about it because there's not a lot of information in terms of, back in the day, it was like, well, if you're good enough, they'll find you, or your high school coach, they'll take care of it. And that was always kind of the message, way back when I was being recruited. But nowadays it's there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of things people can do to move the needle. When people start realizing that, there's 1,700 universities out there in colleges that are looking for talent, and there's, 500,000 opportunities, about 150,000 a year slots that need to be filled. And most people don't have the recruiting budgets to really recruit on that national scale. Most of the D2, D3 schools, even the Division I programs, non-revenue sports, you have a few $1,000s to try to recruit the nation, or now they recruit the world. There's talent. Sure. People are coming over from different countries. So there are a lot of people that got missed in the process, and that I learned when I went through it. And so when we started NCSA, I kind of used myself as the guinea pig as to, I ended up getting a full scholarship at a Division I SEC school at Vanderbilt. And had I not done a lot of work with my dad in terms of putting videos together and making phone calls to college coaches and really trying to put myself on the map, I would have missed that opportunity, and I would have gone back the rest of my life wondering what if. And the big aha moment is, I don't want any family to go through wondering what if. If we could give them a chance to look at all the opportunities realistically, and also look at the great opportunities, not just athletically, but most of the best universities and colleges aren't the Division I schools. And if people start to look at the great D3 opportunities and great D2 opportunities that they could possibly play at, sports can leverage you into a better opportunity, get you into a better school, but then also, I think, be able to help teach you the skills of leadership and things that can set you apart from the rest of the workforce that are trying to get those jobs afterwards.
Chris, you mentioned that the coach can't do it for you. And I think that's such an important lesson, not just in recruiting, but especially across NIL. A high school coach is simply not equipped to help you negotiate a revenue sharing deal. They
Right.
don't have that level of financial literacy. They don't have that background.
Right.
Frankly, they've only been through it. This is brand new. Maybe they've gone through it with 2 or 3 athletes.
Right.
Maybe. Whereas a network like NCSA went through things thousands of times. Can you
Right.
talk a little bit about like the limitations of a college coach and why working with a larger service that have been through this process several times and that infrastructure can help that decision?
Well, that's the thing is most high school coaches are, they're part-time coaches. A lot of them are PE teachers. And so if I'm a student athlete who maybe wants to be a doctor someday, or maybe wants to be a lawyer, or wants to be a business owner, would I take advice from a PE teacher to pick a school? And the answer is no. It's like you want to get advice from people that hopefully, know which schools are going to hopefully give you the tools to reach where you want to go in life. So, understanding that it's not their job, and if they're teaching full time, they're coaching, they're getting paid peanuts. They're underpaid and overworked, and to be able to to expect that coach to make your child a priority and get them off to college is not realistic. They have a role, and they have a big role in the process. But I think number one, understanding the coach's role is the first phase of knowing where you need to pick up the ball, or the proverbial ball, and run with it alongside with the coach's help.
And then at the same time, mom and dad also can't be expected to do everything because a lot of times they're going through the process for the first time. A lot of times they've never even been to college. So it
Right.
can create a strange dynamic for a family that's trying to start out early in the process.
Well, and that's the thing. Most people think, well, the coaches can't talk to you till after your, junior year is over. And there's a lot of myths in recruiting that we at NCSA made a Herculean effort to educate the masses in terms of when recruiting really starts. Recruiting starts the second you get into high school, because you're starting to build your cumulative GPA, which is going to really determine kind of what types of schools you're going to even be able to apply at. So if you don't walk into high school with the plan of how you want to tackle your academic side of things for core courses, because without the core courses you can't even get into college and be recruited. That's step one. The next thing is when colleges can actually talk to you. There are rules around and regulations around the recruiting cycle, which is really, a lot of them haven't applied. But if you're proactive, you can talk to a coach anytime. You can talk to a coach as a 7th and 8th grader, and it happens all the time if you kind of know how the process works. And the idea of talking to coaches is something that we really teach the family, and most importantly, the student athlete, how to advocate for themselves. Because when it comes down to it, the college coach is recruiting not mom and not dad and not high school coach. They're recruiting student athlete that's going to have to play for them for the next 4 to 5, now 6 years in some cases. And if that student doesn't understand that it's going to be their decision, their future, and the fact that the coach is going to want to know what they're getting before they invest time and money into a potential scholarship for them, it really becomes kind of a job interview. And it's you can't have mom do your job interview.
I think that's very well said. Well, we've worked with thousands and thousands of student athletes over the years, and I imagine those patterns emerged of the kids that started too late, or the kids that were dreamers and aimed maybe too high, or the kids that looked at too many schools. And I imagine all of the research that you put into athletes wanted. You saw different patterns and different mistake patterns start to emerge over the years. So, one, what were the most common mistakes you saw in recruiting? But two, what were those insights on how to correct those mistakes?
Well, the most common thing I think, number one, is being realistic. I think understanding where you are at physically as a student athlete compared to the rosters of the college teams that you may be looking at. You may have the biggest heart and be Rudy, but if you're not 6'5", 300 pounds, you're probably not going to catch the attention of Coach Signetti at Indiana. Being realistic on athletics is, I think, the first thing, and also understanding the importance of academics. Most of the colleges, with all the opportunities that are out there, if you really want to play and you are starting as a varsity athlete, maybe as a junior year at most high schools, and if you have a really solid GPA, if you're getting in the 3.2, 3.4, 3.5 GPA, and you're serious about school, we find we found through our research is that there's an opportunity for almost everybody if you are determined enough to start early enough and be realistic.
Chris, it's been 26 years since you started NCSA. The college athletic landscape has changed a lot. Obviously, it's changed even more in the last 4 or 5 years with NIL.
Right.
But what have you seen over the years on how things have evolved, and where do you see things going?
Well, there's been some positives and negatives. I mean, the positive thing with Title IX opened up a lot of opportunities for women, which is great. The boom in women's athletics, I think, has really empowered a lot of females to, have their dreams of continuing to play in college. Now there's flag football that's starting, which is exciting. Whole new sports are coming onto the scene, which is, something that, most people couldn't have imagined 20 years ago. The other side of the coin is that financially, some of the schools have taken off some of the men's sports to make the more opportunities. So it's kind of had I know some of the colleges, the Big Ten, have gotten rid of baseball programs and getting rid of wrestling programs, and some of the other programs where there are a lot of opportunities that have gotten slimmed down some. Also with NIL, a lot of and kids getting an extra 2 or 3 years of eligibility, the kids that are in college are playing more, which has actually shrunk some of the opportunities for the high school kids. So it's gotten to be a little more challenging because those slots aren't opening as much when a starter gets an extra 2 years to start in an SEC school. That means there's probably 2 less spots for a high school kid to be able to come in. So a lot of the guys and coaches are filling out their rosters with kids that have a couple of years of experience rather than that senior in high school who was all state. So I think to be able to figure that into your recruiting journey has been kind of challenging because you're not just going against the kid that's on that program roster now. You're going up against a kid that they may be recruiting or maybe in the portal waiting for that opportunity. So if you're a quarterback and you're wanting to play at a school, there's another layer of competition that isn't as visible, and understanding that that's going to happen, I think is challenging. And that's something I know at NCSA, we were able to teach kids to really find places where they're wanted and that they're really going to have a chance versus the preferred walk-on pitch, which a lot of coaches give kids that they know they could probably play in a scholarship somewhere else, but at my school, you're going to be a walk-on because I know I can take a kid that I know has college experience that's probably going to be plug and play.
Well, shifting a little bit, at NCSA, we were always ahead of the curve on social media. In fact, I was actually the one who started a social media department at NCSA.
Yes.
Social media today,
country probably.
I really actually got a lot of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn in those early days. I was probably one of the first directors of social media in the country. I got a chance to speak at a couple.
True pioneer.
Or just didn't know enough to be to say no. But social media plays such a big role in NIL and this idea of developing a brand and making that brand marketable and reaching out to different either local businesses or national businesses or maybe athletic suppliers. But there's also a downside to social media, and you can make some mistakes early in your career that could really come back to haunt you. I remember we had a speaker at NCSA who worked with us for years, Jack Rankins, that really hammered this part home in terms of the danger of a mobile phone. And that was before we had iPhones. So a lot of things can get out there that could damage your brand later in life. And I wish you could speak to that. Or could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, with AI now, you pull someone's name up and it can pull, everything you put online is there forever, whether you like it or not. And I think a lot of, when you're a 7th and 8th grader and you think you're doing some funny prank and all of a sudden that's something you live with for the rest of your life, people get kicked out of schools. People get labeled things because they thought they were being funny and they didn't realize the impact negatively, how it could affect their family. So just at that basic root level, understanding that what you put online is who you are, whether it's true or not, it's what people perceive you as, and perception is reality. And it's hard to go back and expunge and get rid of things that are unflattering, maybe impossible. So I think for parents to really educate, if a kid has a goal of playing in college or just being a good person and getting getting a job later in life, those things can come up and get you, when you're interviewing for your, your internships and or for your first job on Wall Street, possibly. And if people know, beginning with the end in mind, that could so negatively affect them, I think we as a community and as a family and as a father need to do all we can to protect the kids because their brains aren't developed. They don't make smart decisions. And they're not old enough to do that. That's kind of part of growing up. The problem of growing up is you used to do it in a safe environment at school and you made mistakes and then you got a detention or you got suspended or whatever. And then it all went away. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think to be able to be, if the more we can educate our kids on the perils of social media, and it can be a great advancer in terms of your brand and maybe reaching people and sharing who you are and what you like, if done the right way. But any way that we can teach kids etiquette and teach kids social responsibility. There's bullying that goes on social media that happens. There's, people, are, at a party getting caught doing something. And so the negatives are there, but also the fact that it's so amplified and everyone has a camera these days, hopefully may make students who are serious more aware of their surroundings and who you are is who your friends are and who you're hanging out with is your brand, and may make hopefully, kids get a chance to say, maybe I don't want to hang out with this group because I'm just, even though I may not be drinking or smoking or doing what they're doing, if I'm next to them, I'm going to be associated with that. And the idea of, if you're hanging out with 5 super successful entrepreneurs that all have jets, you'll probably be the 6th one that'll have a jet. If you're hanging out with, 5 people that are hanging out at the bars, and getting drunk, you're going to be the 6th drunk, or at least you'll be affiliated with that. Finding out who your social circles are, and hopefully this can become making a higher alert and awareness of having better friends and making better choices of who you want to be around to be able to hopefully enhance who you are versus bring back who you are. Because the idea of crabs in a bucket, people want to pull people down. And if I'm doing it, well, he's doing it and she's doing it and they're all doing it. Well, it's like my mom used to say, if Bobby runs off, jumps off the end of the bridge, you're going to do it too. It's that whole thing that, that age old, thing that our parents taught me when I was a kid, it applies. It's like, you are who you hang out with.
Chris, you've always pursued entrepreneurial education as long as I've met you. And I've always known how you've preached the importance of athletics in becoming an entrepreneur and the lessons that you learned. Can you talk about that a little bit further, especially for these student athletes that are probably having to approach business a little bit earlier than you had to, because they're literally becoming employees by getting a check from the university or from RevShare or from NIL deals at a very early age, and the importance of being a responsible entrepreneur?
Well, the kids are being thrust into these roles, whether they like it or not. If you're a 5-star recruit, you immediately are going to have 100,000, 200,000 people following you just because of what you did on the athletic field. Those eyeballs are there, whether you like it or not. And I think for some kids, it's a little overwhelming, and I think they may not be ready to handle that. And you never had to think about really having a kid form an LLC as a freshman in high school, which today is happening. And what comes along with being a CEO of your business, and that comes along, and it takes time to learn, and it also takes failure for these lessons to kick in sometimes. And I think to be able to surround yourself and be able to find out and do your homework to be able to get some guardrails up is really important. But not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. And, the idea of being a leader, sports a lot of times teaches us about leadership early, which is awesome. And that's one of the beautiful things about sports is, as a team, usually if you're the better athlete, you become a team captain. People look up to you. You want to be the first on the field, last off the field. You want to work hard. You want to set that example if you want to win. The more you start to view yourself as a leader earlier, I think helps develop the habits of a winner and a leader. And that's what sports does, and I think better than anything else, is that you're looked at by your peers. You're looked at as how you handle yourself when you win, Are you a jerk and are you taunting people, or are you shaking someone's hand and saying great game and appreciating the competition? Or are you, or when you lose, how you handle yourself? You look at just even at the highest levels, you look at people that have supposedly have these unbelievable, illustrious collegiate careers. And then one small thing, I don't know if you watched the women's basketball Final Four, Gino Ormieta, the legendary coach at UConn, who's won more titles than anyone in women's basketball. In one moment, he walked off the coach and didn't shake the coach's hands of the other team, Don Staley. And the backlash he's gotten from that is going to stick with him. It's going to be part of his legacy. He worked 40 years to have this legacy of being this winner and this person of character and class. But you do one thing like that, and people remember you for those things. And I think sports can teach you those valuable lessons, and that in one moment that it could all go, the view of who people think you are goes away. Diego Pavia, our quarterback at Vanderbilt, who I'm friends with, and I love the kid. One instance at the end, at the Heisman, he's out after celebrating, after he came in second to the Heisman to your quarterback Mendoza, and he did some dumb things at a nightclub that got on TV. Next thing you know, he's supposed to be being drafted as a leader into the NFL, but there's a lot of NFL executives thinking, do I want this kid anymore? So it's going to literally cost him possibly millions of dollars in opportunities at the NFL because of one small mistake that he made after, in a place that, he thought he was safe possibly. So the idea of being an entrepreneur, it really comes down to being a leader. And I think that's one of the things that, to wrap it back into your question, Brian, is if you're a leader, you can't just be a leader on the field and not off the field, because they've really, social media has made it where you are who you are on both surfaces. And you need to start figuring out a way of how you're going to act, congruently. You can't just be the person that's a great leader on the field and be a jerk to your classmates at school because you think you're better than them. And I think hopefully as an athlete, we can teach those lessons of how important leadership is, on and off the field. If you're, a good football player, but if you're bullying kids at the lunchroom, now that's not a good look. And coaches today, they don't go and ask about just the coach of who your football coach or your basketball coach. They go and ask your teachers, how are they in class? Are they asking questions? Do they sit in the front of the room or the back of the room? Are they getting their classwork on time? Do they show up on time? Are they tardy to class? That's the thing. Coaches, people think that it's just on the field, but most of the time coaches are looking at how are you off the field? How are you in warmups? What are you doing? How do you treat the lunch lady in the lunch line? And are you pleased and thank youing, or are you saying, hey, give me some more potatoes and be on your way?
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to wrap things up. I know you're just back on campus and we were honored with the Krause Leadership Symposium. Congratulations, first of all. How did that feel?
Wow. Humbling, really humbling, Brian. Vanderbilt gave me a lot, gave me an opportunity, and gave me a chance to go from blue collar North Chicago to be able to play football in the SEC and get a world-class education, and also surround myself with so many leaders and smart people that are way smarter than me, and opening me up for opportunities to get the internships at the consulting firms where I was able to learn sales and management and build a lot of the tools that really shaped me into and gave me the confidence to be the entrepreneur and start a company. I think entrepreneurship, back to from your previous question, it takes courage. And the way I got courage was because I learned skills that gave me confidence. It's like I knew I could sell, and I felt that I could move the needle if I could connect my passion. But passion without skills is just, a lot of rah-rah energy. But passion with skills, if you understand want, need, benefits, close, and building a vision and building KPIs around it and building systems for success around that passion is the way you get results. The idea is, having a dream is one thing, but having a vision and a goal and a SMART goal that's written down, that's specific, measurable, recorded over time, that's a replicable model. That's a recipe for success. And to be able to have used what Vanderbilt taught me to be able to go back and share that story with them, and now to impact other leaders and think about my leadership legacy. I just turned 60. So I'm like, what's my legacy going to be? And I look back and I think about other leaders, and you're one of them, to be able to be proud that I had some role in hopefully maybe, sharing some knowledge or some wisdom or some inspiration to help other leaders that have gone on to do cool things and have inspired other leaders. That's kind of my measure of a leader, is how many leaders have I helped elevate and have I helped inspire? And when I look back at the kind of the coaching tree or the leadership tree of the people that I've worked with, from people that are still running NCSA to people like yourself and a lot of other people who had a chance to work at NCSA and hopefully learn some great tools and then take those tools to their passion and be successful. That's a win in my book. And hopefully, when I'm gone, that's all that'll be left behind. And to be able to know that I was able to have an impact at Vanderbilt in helping them build a sustainable leadership model. That means the world to me, and it gives me a lot of passion. I'm writing another book. It's called Built to Win, BILT, Built to Win, and I'm doing it with Vanderbilt. And it's how leadership turns into legacy. And to be able to share those stories that we've learned through 40 years of experience with 20-year-olds, how much further advanced will they be as leaders? I look at them as, if I can give them those tools and let them take their knowledge and wisdom and passion and help them change the world, we'll have a better place we'll be living in when I'm an old man or gone.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for being on the pod. We'll have to have you back when the book is out.
Oh, I'd love to be
anything
back.
Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
No, I think, I love leaders are learners. And I think the thirst for knowledge is something that I learned at Vanderbilt. And I think if people start looking at themselves as a leadership journey that never ends, and if you can learn something from the amount I'm learning from these students has been incredible. I get more from, I think, learning from the students by teaching leadership than I think I've ever learned in other ways. So I'm going to encourage hopefully anyone that's watching to dig in, think about their leadership journey, and starting early and surround yourself with people that you can learn from is the recipe that I've used for success. And hopefully we can pay it forward that way. So thanks, Brian.
You got it. Thank you, CK.
Thanks for listening to the NIL Spotlight podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to visit nilgameplan.com to get started on your NIL journey for free. We'll see you next week.